So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this, the first European Parliamentary Research Service event of 2021, a year which we hope will bring better fortune than 2020. And just as one of our last events last year was to look at what the significance of 2020 was, historically, politically, economically, socially, a year that we're all going to remember for the rest of our lives. So now we fast forward to the new year, and in a pattern of events which we've been pioneering over the last 5 years, EPRS asks 10 of our policy analysts to try to look forward to significant issues which they think need to be considered in the light of evolving circumstances. 10 issues to watch, Europe's challenges in 2021. This, as I say, is the 5th year in which we've done it. Every year we produce a publication which has a couple of pages on each of these, and we ask our own policy analysts to choose. You'll have seen in the program for the event the diversity of domestic, foreign, international issues which are being covered. And we also invite, characteristically, and we're delighted to see him here today, the Vice President responsible for the Members' Research Service and the library within EPRS, Ottmar Karas, to say a few introductory remarks. He's been a member of the European Parliament since 1999. He's Vice President, in addition to responsibility for those elements of EPRS, also information and communication policy of the European Parliament and relations with NATO, the OSCE, the World Bank and the IMF. He's also a member of the Parliament's Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee and its delegation for relations with the United States. A very topical and powerful combination of responsibilities at the moment. EPRS tries to run about somewhere around 50 events during the course of the year. They're all being done digitally now, which proved in the first instance to be something of a challenge. But we've been attracting substantial audiences, and I hope it serves an interest within the European Parliament as we seek to inform and indeed empower the institution in the European public debate. And to kick things off, therefore, I would like to ask Vice President Karas if he would say a few scene-setting remarks. And Happy New Year to you, and indeed Happy New Year to everybody who's here watching right now. Over to you, Vice President Karas.
Happy New Year, ladies and gentlemen, meine Damen und Herren, liebe Freundinnen und Freunde. Dear Anthony, cher Etienne, 1 year ago, we met to launch the 2020 edition of 10 issues to watch. I remember the issues very well: biodiversity, digital Europe, migration, our European budget, climate, the US election, to name just a few. 1 year ago as well, on this very day, the World Health Organization received more information about the outbreak of a new virus in China. We moved from a virus in January to a pandemic in March. Yet, the 10 issues you identified have remained fully relevant. They guided our reflection, even in the middle of the storm. This is why, as Vice President of the European Parliament responsible for the Members' Research Service, I value this annual publication, and this is why it is a true pleasure and honor to open this event today. Today, 1 year later, what stays with us? Some see only a crisis, only the negative, only the bad news. I see more than this dark picture. I see some positive. I see some light. First, I see the lessons we as Europeans have learned. We have learned that national borders are not the answer with global events. The answer is cooperation. We have learned that we were strong where we had invested before with unexpected events. The answer is invest, build for the next generation. We have learned to bring comprehensive solutions to help our citizens. We need to strengthen our social and health policies. Second, I see progress, major progress. Who would have thought just 1 year ago that we would end up with a deal on such a large budget? Who would have bet just 1 year ago that we would agree on the rule of law as a condition to get European funds? Who would have said just 1 year ago that we would reach a 55% objective to cut greenhouse gas emissions in 10 years? All this is not just good news. These are huge steps. These are huge successes. Third, I see that the pandemic has actually created opportunity. Opportunity to set the right priorities. Green, digital, social, competitiveness. Opportunity to see how relevant the European project is. We are the only continent that holds and defends so dearly parliamentarism, democracy, rule of law, our common values. This reminds me of the words of the German poet Friedrich Hölderlin. But where the danger is, grows the saving power also. Let me say it in German. Wo aber die Gefahr ist, wächst das Rettende auch. For this saving power to grow, we have all we need. We have the instruments with the European Green Deal. We have a budget to invest with Next Generation EU. It is for each of us now to play his or her role. These 10 issues will show us where to pay attention, where to act. I am looking forward to listening now to you. Let's get started. Vielen Dank. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much indeed, Vice President Karas. We really appreciate the fact that you have joined us on this occasion and made those inspiring and very encouraging remarks. And indeed, EPRS itself produced towards the end of last year a publication entitled 10 Opportunities for Europe Post-Coronavirus. We see it usually in terms of risks, capabilities, and resilience. And we're doing a lot of work in that field as a parliamentary research service, but there are also opportunities. And hopefully in that spirit, the panel will analyze 10 of the key issues that we want to watch during the course of the current year. And I'd like to pass over right now to Etienne Bassot, who's coordinated this exercise and who is the director of the Members Research Service in EPRS. Over to you, Etienne.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and thank you very much to you, Vice President Karas, for this introduction and the nice words about the EPRS, and thank you for your constant support to the EPRS, not only for that publication, but all over the year. And thank you also for sharing your optimism about the year 2021. On my side, I want also to wish everyone a very happy new year, wherever you are in Europe, and a welcome to this event. The 10 issues to watch are important for us for 3 reasons. First, because the exercise is driven by the research teams themselves. They suggested the subjects, they wrote on them, they present them now. Second, because it is a collective exercise and the results of many interactions between the authors, their managers, the editors that lead to a product that is in no way about agenda setting, but rather an open exploration of what could matter in the year to come. And third, because, and this is about the event today, because it's a nice way to connect with you with the EPRS audience in public and to kick off a year of event. And if I check the numbers, we have about 140 attendees right now, all over Europe, including just in Athens, somebody joining us. We will have a first succinct presentation by the 10 authors and then move to a discussion with the digital audience where you will have the possibility to intervene. So let's go straight to business and talk about something everyone has in their heads right now that concerns us all, our families and friends. The vaccine race for health and safety with Jakub Prečatnik. Jakub works in the External Policies Unit. He has followed the pandemic since the beginning. Jakub, you worked together with our public health specialist, Nicole Scholz. Can you present the main goals of recently started vaccination campaign? And can you talk about the challenges that the world will be dealing with in 2021 during this complex operation?
Thank you, Etienne. Vaccine race for health safety. Why race? Because we'd like to have it and deploy it as soon as possible to save lives, as well as to unblock our social and economic life. Why health safety? Because our ultimate goal is to protect our societies from COVID disease. We need to achieve it through population immunity gained thanks to vaccination campaign. The European Commission granted conditional authorization to BioNTech, Pfizer and Moderna, and vaccination campaigns has started in Europe. The vaccines are distributed equally between member states based on population size. Member states define priority groups, prepare vaccine logistics, including cold chain of up to -70 to -80 degrees. So we have the first vaccines. What do we need now? We need to develop population immunity everywhere. This can require vaccinating up to 70% of population. And now there are and there will be disinformation campaigns led not only by anti-vaccine movements, but also by foreign powers interested in undermining our society. The best way to counter it is to be transparent about benefits and risks of vaccines. This builds trust. We should also remember that vaccine is a global public good which should be equitably distributed across the globe. Finally, population immunity is necessary everywhere. In this regard, the EU is a leader of global solidarity efforts to speed up universal access to vaccine, also in low and middle income countries. Vaccine distribution is an unprecedented challenge. We have to produce the vaccine and global production capacity is limited. Scaling up of the raw material supply chain takes longer than initially expected. We have to transport them, and it's estimated that providing a single dose to almost 8 billion people would require 8,000 B747 cargo aircraft flights. We have to care about distribution security. Interpol warned about potential criminal activities such as theft and falsification of vaccines. Corruption might be also an issue. We have to monitor possible side effects, an important task for our scientists. In conclusion, there might be things which will not go perfectly well. Wise scientists advise to expect unexpected. Therefore, we should be prepared for different and changeable scenarios this year. So I believe everyone should play his or her role this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jakub. And we see with this vaccine race how much the role of the EU has evolved in less than a year. The EU is the central player for the provision of vaccines to the EU population. Who would have thought so a year ago? And this brings me to the next subject where the EU did a major step forward. It's about the EU recovery plan and the question turning a crisis into an opportunity by Mariana Paré. Mariana, you joined the Budgetary Policies Unit a bit more than a year ago. You have a long experience on EU budgetary issues, both in Parliament and in the Commission. And in her paper, Mariana, she looks at the budgets, at the Union's budget's response to this pandemic to help the EU address the consequences of the pandemic, the EU has now agreed on the Next Generation EU. Mariana, I read from some experts that this recovery fund is breaking with some taboos. Why do they say this? Why is it so special about it? Mariana.
Yes, thank you, Etienne. Indeed, Next Generation EU is innovative and is breaking some taboos for three main reasons. First, because of its size. It is the largest plan ever financed through the EU budget. To give you a rough idea, this is about almost 5 EU annual budgets. Second reason, it is the way it will be financed. The Commission, for the first time, will borrow funds on the capital markets on behalf of the Member States. And third reason, it is about the strong link it creates with Union's priorities. It is not only about money, it is also about using this crisis to invest in the green and digital transition. And now EU funding is also linked to the respect of the Union's fundamental values, much discussed last December.
So, and where do we stand now? Is the plan ready to kick off?
Not yet, Etienne. There are still two major steps ahead of us. First, we need the Member States to ratify their own resources decision. The ratification process took last time more than 2 years. Now, under these extraordinary times, we hope it can be completed within 6 months, and we hope without any problems. In parallel, the Member States have to submit their national recovery plans. This is to be done by the end of April, and they need to be approved by then so it can kick off. To conclude, Etienne, this recovery plan is not only about facing the crisis, it is also about the Union's priorities, and this is what we're going to be looking at if the EU will turn this crisis into an opportunity and move ahead to a better and stronger EU. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariana, for this very clear explanation. Let's move now to a series of sectorial issues: food and nutrition, inequalities, and culture. And let me turn to our next topic, food for all, food for thought. I introduce our next speaker, Anna CAPRILE, who brings with her more than 20 years of experience in development and cooperation. She worked with Marie-Laure Auger-Granier, another policy analyst in the EPRS, on this contribution. So Anna, can you tell us why we should be looking at food in 2021?
Thank you very much, Etienne. Yes, indeed. Food. Why food? In 2020, for the first time in the lifespan of many of us, most of us actually, we feared food shortages here in our first world, in our supermarkets, while we saw a chronic hunger spreading in most vulnerable countries. It was a wake-up call, a strong one. So are policymakers going to pick it up? What's next? The paper looks exactly into that. What was the impact of the coronavirus crisis in the food security and food chains throughout the world, and how policymakers will or will not respond to those challenges? And here I would like to share with you a piece of good news, a piece of bad news, and a reason for hope. The good news is that the EU system proved, in general, resilient. The crisis, however, put in evidence some structural, profound weaknesses that we have to fix. The bad news is that beyond the EU, the picture looks, I'm afraid, much gloomier. You will find some figures in the paper, but today I want to share one. Today, almost 1 out of 10 people in the world are hungry. And almost the same number, 1 out of 10, suffer from obesity. This is paradoxical. Let me share one more piece of information. Look at this plate. Imagine that this is the food produced in one day in the whole world. By the end of today, 1/3 of this food will be wasted or lost. And you will wonder, is that new? Certainly not. The inconvenient truth that we have to face is that since long, the way we produce, trade, and consume food is unsustainable, unhealthy, and ultimately unfair. And this, you will agree, Etienne, is bad news.
Yes, but so you said there is reason for hope after all.
Indeed. Indeed, the crisis, as in many other areas of our lives, has also opened a window of change and has opened the opportunity for accelerated reform, much needed reform, in the food systems in general. There are many initiatives going on, some touching upon you very closely as consumers, as producers, but now there is a momentum to accelerate reforms at a global level. And if there is one event to watch, that could be the UN Food System Summit in September 2021, where the EU, if I can say, can play a strong role, push a bold agenda for systemic reform and strong global governance. So let's watch it, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Anna. And when I was listening to you, I even understand why the Nobel Prize has attributed the Peace Nobel Prize this year to the World Food Programme in 2020. And I think that food and nutrition are going to remain very central to the aftermath of the COVID crisis. Let's move now to our next subject, reinvigorating the fight against inequality. And let's move to Rosamund SHREEVES. Discrimination and inequality costs individuals and society dearly. They are a growing cause of concern. Rosamund SHREEVES has been working as an analyst on equality issues for many years, together with Martina Pirpic, who is the co-author of this contribution. Rose, what are the challenges and opportunities that will come to the fore in 2021 in the wake of the COVID crisis? Up to you, Rosamund.
Thank you, Etienne. So I'd like to begin by conjuring up a picture of where we are now and what is at stake. We often talk about equality in terms of creating a level playing field. So let's pause for a moment to see that playing field in our mind's eye. Do we actually know enough about where it needs leveling? Who's going to be responsible for doing the work? And who's going to pay for it? And if we look at the players on that field, making the field level may not be enough to allow all the players to take part in the game. Some may not be able to get access to the field. Some may not have access to the equipment they need to play. Some may not want to be on a team with others. And some may even be actively stopping others from playing. And what if we're trying to level our playing field in the middle of a hurricane? A hurricane is very likely to play havoc with our plans, and it could even harm many of the players. On the other hand, more positively, it could also expose weak points in our infrastructure and give us an opportunity to design and build a better one. So how does this analogy apply to the situation facing the EU and its member states when it comes to fighting inequality and discrimination over the coming year? Well, first and foremost, as you would already have guessed, the pandemic is the hurricane that's burst onto the scene. It's both exposed and worsened many of the existing inequalities and shone a light on the weaknesses in our current systems. Many groups that were already experiencing discrimination and exclusion are now most exposed to the virus and least able to access healthcare. They are also more vulnerable to the economic fallout, and there's a real risk that any policies that we introduce now could widen this inequality still further. Secondly, if we go back to our image, the EU's been making efforts to level the playing field for some time, but the results have been patchy. One long-standing challenge is that EU equality law is not always applied effectively, Another challenge is that adopting new equality law is difficult because this requires unanimity in the Council. And this has been particularly tricky in recent years because this policy area has become a focus for disagreements over EU competence and values. So the key question for 2021 is how these two issues, the pandemic and the long-standing challenges, will impact on the Commission's plans to reinvigorate the fight against inequality. The Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has said that equality is at the top of her political agenda. And in 2020, the Commission adopted several specific strategies and action plans on gender equality, LGBTIQ equality, racial equality, and Roma inclusion. So in 2021, the Commission intends to shift from strategy to delivery. And the spotlight's going to fall on the concrete challenges of implementing the plans and bringing about real change. So I think to sum up, the question is not whether inequality and discrimination exist in Europe, but how we as individuals and societies can recognize it and fight it more effectively. And in 2021, many stakeholders will be watching to see what can be achieved. You'll find more data in the 10 issues to watch and a link to our legislative train, which will give you regular updates on what's happening. Thank you, Etienne. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Rosamund. At this stage, I would like to indicate that you can use the chat and the Q&A functions. It is open, and I already see questions coming in. So don't hesitate to use that functionality. We'll bring the question after the presentations, once the presentations are completed. Let's move now to our next subject, a digital boost for the circular economy by Gregor Erbach. Gregor is head of our newly created Climate Action Research and Tracking Service in the EPRS. His expertise is climate and energy policies, and he has authored more than 100 EPRS publications. We discussed the issue of climate change as such in previous editions of the 10 issues, but this time, Gregor, you have decided to focus on a subject at the crossroads, how to bring together two revolutions. On the one hand, the digital transformation, on the other hand, the Green Deal. Up to you, Gregor.
Thank you, Etienne. Today, we are in the middle of two key global transitions, a continuous digital revolution and a transition towards a climate-neutral circular economy. This should be achieved by 2050 as part of the European Green Deal, faster than any other industrial revolution in history. Both of these transitions are high on the political agenda of the EU institutions. I would like to discuss how digital services and technologies can give a boost to the circular climate-neutral economy. In the old linear economy, we use resources to make products, and after they're used, the products become waste. In contrast, in a circular economy, products stay in use for longer and materials are used over and over again. So there's no waste. Digital technologies have shown their use for supporting sustainability. Digital equipment is becoming ever more powerful and energy efficient at the same time. In the energy system, for example, smart grids and smart buildings help to optimize energy use and integrate renewable energies. Now, how can digital technologies help the circular economy? They can help design products that can be repaired, upgraded, and disassembled and recycled after their useful life. They enable the sharing of products, think of smart mobility and the sharing of vehicles. Technologies such as blockchain can help to track materials over the full product life cycle. Moreover, digital technologies enable complex industrial ecosystems in which the waste of one production process becomes valuable input to another process, the principle of industrial symbiosis. However, digital technologies also present a huge challenge for circularity. Increasing miniaturization and complexity make recycling extremely difficult. For example, a smartphone contains a very large number of valuable materials, but at really tiny scales. And the life cycles are becoming shorter, which leads to an ever-growing amount of e-waste, of which only a small collection is collected and recycled today. Finally, I would like to suggest that the digital revolution can serve as a model for how to move to the circular climate neutral economy. Digital technologies have completely changed the way we work, consume, and communicate over a short time. 20 years ago, we still used fax machines, and today we're here all together in this digital online meeting. And this fast transition can be a model for accelerating the urgent transition toward a sustainable circular economy. And it needs to be supported by policies that promote a circular economy and unleash the potential for innovation. A digitally empowered circular economy will help the EU industry to reduce its dependency on imported materials and to become a global leader in technology and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregor. But what else is binding these digital and circular forces together? Our next speaker, Marcin Cierpański, will answer this question. He is an economist and trade policy analyst and in the external policies unit of the EPRS. Marcin has also written extensively on the transformation of European industry. The floor is yours, Marcin.
Thank you, Etienne. 3 words that answer your questions are critical raw materials. But what are they? Let me show you something. The first mobile phones used to look like this. We went from this to this thanks to critical raw materials. Let's see now what, why, and how of critical raw materials. First question, what? What are they? 2 characteristics. They are strategically important, and they are very much in global demand. But we can find them just in a handful of countries, often unstable and our direct competitors. So we need to import them, and the global competition is fierce. Second question, why? Why are they strategically important? They contribute to 2 main objectives of the EU. First, our strategic autonomy. We need them to act independently. Second, the recovery. We need them to recover from the pandemic. The EU created its response to the crisis not as a return to status quo, but as opportunity for the twin digital and green transition, as explained by Mariana before. We need them for digital technologies, such as data storage and robotics. We need them for green technologies, such as wind turbines and electric engines. Third and final question, how? How can we fix this? Europe must act on many fronts, and 2021 is the year when it will all take shape. Europe can increase domestic mining. Europe can help coal and carbon-intensive regions to switch to critical raw materials. Europe's Copernicus satellites can help to find new sites. Next, by circularity and recycling, as Gregor just said. Every year we recycle millions tons of electronics, the equivalent of 300 Eiffel Towers. But from this, we recover only 1% of critical materials. EU will fund research to obtain more. Now, even with all this, we need more from abroad. Europe is taking several external actions, as I explained in the paper. To conclude, to secure critical raw materials, Europe needs to act, and it starts this year. So definitely an issue to watch in 2021. Thank you, Etienne. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Marcin. I would like now to turn to another subject that is very often forgotten. It's from Denis Kirkop, who has worked together with another analyst, Magdalena Pazinowska-Schnass, on culture and artists. Denis, we know that the cultural sector in general has made huge losses during the year 2020. Even more so, in the case of live performances, culture is really in crisis. So I'm wondering about your analysis about the future that awaits this sector. Up to you, Denise.
Thank you, Etienne, and hello, everybody. Please bring back a memory of your favorite artist, company, band, orchestra, and the theater or venue you enjoyed going to. What can you do so they survive? Support them financially, check what they need to thrive. During the lockdowns, artists performed free of charge from their balconies or windows, and they shared content online. This is helping us come through the crisis. But in the meantime, many of them were left stranded. Closed venues and artists who quit impoverish the diversity in our cultural offer, not just now, but in the future as well. That would be such a pity, because if society was a living being, culture would be its imagination. It is how we share meaning and inspire. 2021 will be a crash test. What will happen to our cultural sector is not a foregone conclusion. That depends on what we do, each one of us, you and I. Will we support crowdfunding and other initiatives? Will we influence decision makers to dedicate money and tools? Will we support policies that sustain diversity and variety? All our cultural actors matter, big ones and small. And all our cultural forms are important, the old and established and the new and emerging. Because culture, or collective imagination, is creative. And listening to the other speakers, we hear how important it is to be inspired. Our paper on culture reflects on how individuals, different levels of government, and the EU can help. So Etienne, dear audience, I conclude by asking you how we can be supportive of culture and artists. This is for public institutions such as our European Parliament, for civil society, and for each and every one of us. It is our turn to find out what the sector really needs and to pay it more than lip service. By this evening, please, jot down one thing you want to do. And with this, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Denise, for this. And just here, I would like to say that when you were presenting Denise, but also the other authors, Anna, Rosamund, and Gregor Marcin, is how much issues that you raise are about what we classically call internal policies of the EU, but that are also an international dimension, or let's say global dimension. And it's clearly obvious that the world has changed over the time. And to move to this aspect of, let's say, the larger dimension and beyond our borders, I move naturally to the next issue, that is the new procedure to manage Europe's borders by Kostika Dumbrava. Kostika is a policy analyst in the Citizens Policy Unit, dealing with EU migration, Schengen, and external borders. Kostika, migration and borders have been high on the agenda for years. The question is controversial. The question of safe borders on the one hand, but also the human approach towards migrants are issues that are extremely important also for the general public in the EU. According to your research, where should we focus our attention now? What is the key issue to watch for the year to come?
Thank you, Etienne. First of all, it's true that nowadays, if you see the statistics and numbers, we see that there are less people crossing the European borders as compared to, for example, 5 years ago. However, this is a bit misleading, so I don't think it's a good benchmark to use to assess EU migration and asylum policies. There's another story that is told maybe by reports which are almost daily about, shocking living conditions in asylum centers, or about alleged illegal pushbacks at the EU borders. So whereas it's not really a crisis as it used to be, there are still important issues to be addressed. What is the EU doing in this moment? The latest and biggest initiative is the Commission new Pact on Migration and Asylum, which was launched in September. And this is a proposal, a package of proposals that aims to finalize the reform of the asylum system, but also to integrate relevant policies on migration, return, asylum, and external cooperation on migration. So here it is, what I picked for this publication is this key proposal to establish a screening procedure at the borders to deal with people who have no right to enter the EU. In this case, illegal migrants and also people who seek asylum. So this proposal it's interesting because it also proposes some preliminary health check, for example, and also fundamental rights mechanism that comes with it. Will this work? The big question now. As you mentioned, it's a long history of trying to fix the problems. So it is fair to say that the proposal has been received with quite a bit of skepticism. Stakeholders have pointed to lack of impact assessment, to negative effects on asylum and borders. As for member states, we see more support, but there are still people who are unconvinced about the practical benefits of the proposal, especially when it comes to how we'll facilitate returns, which is a key issue. Now, the success of the proposal will, as you can imagine, depend on the success of the whole pact, and we should expect long and complex negotiations ahead. For me to conclude is maybe it's important to remember that this is an important moment, and it's not just about fixing immediate problems, but also about making sure that asylum and migration policies are future-proof and they are able to actually withstand the future crises that will probably come along the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kostika, for this presentation. Migration is often mentioned in the context of the relations with Turkey. And our next topic is Turkey and stormy waters in the Mediterranean. And the presenter is Branislav STANICEK. Branislav is expert on the southern neighborhood, Western Balkans, and Turkey. In his recent research, he tackles geopolitical challenges in the Eastern Mediterranean and EU-Turkey relations. In 2020, the EU decided to suspend the pre-accession funds for Turkey. We read every day about Turkey with a feeling of a constant in and out, out and in. So my question to you, Branislav, is there a possibility that the whole accession would be suspended?
Thank you, Etienne. So this year, 2021, will be a very important year in EU-Turkey relationship. As we have observed during the European Council meeting in last December, leaders of the EU requested European Commission to prepare a new EU-Turkey strategy before the next meeting in March 2021. Also, last Saturday, during this last weekend, Turkey President Erdogan had a call with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and they discussed this future of EU-Turkey relationship. Among the top priority was trade relationship, migration, but of course accession talks. We have to say that accession talks that started in October 2005 have not been very smooth, and Turkey opened 15 chapters but closed only one on science and research. So we see very small advance. Why it is so? Because in particular since 2016, Turkey is not aligning with EU accession and also EU values and EU policies. We can see it in external engagement in Syria, in Libya, but also recently in Nagorno-Karabakh. So probably it is not in the interest of the EU to suspend totally accession talks, but we will keep the accession process open. But we have also taken into account the situation of minorities in Turkey, but also situation of other political groups like liberals that have been very successful, especially in municipalities.
Thanks, Bran. Everyone has their eyes in Washington these days. Along your analysis, what's the influence of the Biden, what will be the influence of the Biden administration on EU-Turkey relations? And more generally, the prospects about the Eastern Mediterranean?
Yes. So among the most important issue for Joe Biden, who is a veteran of external policies, he was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, is for sure to improve relations with the EU and also to make a new strategy for the whole Mediterranean. We have seen in 2018 that the United States redeployed the forces, in particular in Pacific, but what we observed recently, it is a new focus on Russia and also what we call Southern neighborhood. When we observe a declaration of the President-elect Joe Biden, we see that he is strongly attached to human rights, to the values, and also to the multilateral international affairs. On Turkey, he was very critical. He even said that President Erdogan is autocrat. So what we can expect is more harmonization and more cooperation with the EU on the topic of Turkey, and also I would say a kind of hard line on Turkey to move Turkey to more democratic and freedom standards.
Thank you, Bran. And let's move to the last presentation. A new US president in the White House by Elena Lazarou. Who would have thought a few years ago what has happened recently in the US? And what is to be expected for Europe in the middle term? Elena Lazarou is acting head of the External Policies Unit. She has followed transatlantic relations and US foreign policy for several years as a policy analyst. Most recently, she published a briefing on US foreign policy under the Biden administration. Tensions in the East Med are one of the many issues on which the European Union and the United States could work together. Eleni, should we expect to see more cooperation between the EU and the US in regional crises and other issues under the new administration? That is my question to you. Up to you, Eleni.
Thank you very much, Etienne, and good afternoon to everyone. Indeed, as Branislav has just said, there is cautious optimism towards the prospects of the EU and the US being able to work closer together on a series of regional and global issues underpinned by the approach of the incoming administration towards democracy, human rights, and other values that are common. And I find it quite appropriate that I come in last on this panel because the Vice President began his talk by explaining that there is, in spite of the global pandemic, there are reasons to be optimistic. And I think the US election and the inauguration of the new administration, which will take place on January 20th, is an example of how challenges can actually result in optimism. In a way, as my favorite poet likes to say, there is a certain slant of light in winter afternoons. The first challenge I think that the US election has shown us can in the end result in optimistic results is the election itself. I just wanted to remind everyone, although I think we have all watched this closely, that the United States held their elections amidst the global pandemic that hit the United States quite disproportionately. There's been over 370,000 deaths and 21 million infections in the US. And yet we saw the highest turnout in US elections that we've seen since the early 20th century, which proves that democracy and elections can take place amidst a pandemic, which has made us all work from home and on screens. As a result, on the 20th of January, it will inaugurate Joe Biden as its 46th president, a Democrat president, and the first woman to occupy the post of vice president, including bringing in a Congress which will, which as it seems likely, in which Democrats will hold control of both houses, which means that we will have a strong United States administration able to implement change in these really difficult times. The second challenge that many see as perhaps problematic in US-EU relations, but I would argue we should see with optimism, is that this new administration will have a lot of work to do at home. But when one looks closely at the Biden-Harris agenda, one can see that the issues that they will face at home are similar to those that we will face at home in the EU. I just mentioned a few: equality, vaccine distribution, jobs and smart investments, health, democracy. These are issues that the EU, as my colleagues have said in their presentations, will also have to face in the coming years. So I think there is the optimism that there will be a lot of cooperation. And finally, on regional and global crises, as you mentioned, I think there is a lot of challenge in the world of today, but a lot of optimism through the new EU-US agenda for global change that the European Council welcomed in December, which among other things includes security and defense, the all-important issue of the responsibility of online digital platforms, and a number of other issues ranging from peace and security to technology and democracy. So I think there is optimism to believe that looking forward, 2021 will be a good year for transatlantic relations and for multilateralism, which has always been underpinned by the transatlantic relationship.
Thank you, Elena, for this presentation, and thank you also for highlighting how much challenges are similar on both sides of the Atlantic, and answers could be also coordinated and hopefully are going to be better coordinated. With this, we come to the end of the first part of our event, namely the presentations by the 10 authors, and we move now to the Q&A session. So I have to look down at what I have received here. And I would like to group questions, and the two first questions will be, I think, for Jakub on the vaccines, and they will be also for Mariana. Let me just, yes, for Jakub, this question: the vaccine race. What is the biggest challenge to the vaccine deployment? That's a question for Jakub. So think about it, Jakub. I come back to you in 1 second. And for Mariana, 2 questions. The EU is borrowing on the markets, mutually and jointly responsible for our debts. Is this one giant step for fiscal integration? Question mark. What are the political implications and when? And another question, which is a bit linked, which is about the recovery plan. When can we expect to see the first euros invested in concrete projects? How much time will it take? So, please, maybe Jakub, your thoughts about the challenges on the vaccine.
Thank you, Etienne, for this question. So I think that vaccination is a long-term project with really different studies. So the biggest challenges for the time being is both production and distribution. But this is for the time being, and perhaps at one moment it will be more the challenge of the distribution, but later on it may be a challenge of production. There will be most probably a moment when we will get to a challenge of vaccine hesitancy, because to get this population immunity, we need more than around 70% of people being vaccinated. And it would be really a pity to have 68% and miss really be so close to the target. So I believe it will be really changing all over the year. Then we should also analyze this question from different perspective, because we have our perspective of the European Union, but we have also a global perspective. And having this supply chain of minus 80 degrees is doable here, but are we really sure it's doable everywhere? So exactly. So I believe that further research, which will lead us to new vaccines, will create new opportunities and will enable the vaccination all over the world, especially I believe about the possibility to keep a vaccine in an ordinary fridge. This will be one changer. Another changer which might happen will be a vaccine which will be efficient just after the first vaccine. So I think these are issues which we will be watching this year. cross fingers.
Thank you, Jakub. Very comprehensive answer. Mariana, the recovery plan, a step forward like a gigant?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Etienne, I think it is a giant step because some months ago, just before the pandemic, I don't think anyone would have ever thought that we will come to issue a common debt. So indeed, we froze the fiscal rules. This is applicable for 2020, 2021. I think we will have heated discussions. Actually, some experts believe that our fiscal rules are outdated in the current pandemic. I think now the priority is to implement the recovery plan and what we have. But I would say that end of the year, we will have heated discussions on how to move ahead for 2022, under which fiscal conditions. And indeed, it is an element of integration, this common debt, that shows that we want to do something and go ahead all together. And I think there was a second question.
It's about when are we going to see the first concrete projects delivered on the ground?
Now it is at the member states camp. As I said, we still need the recovery plans to be submitted and approved. They have to be submitted by the end of April. In the meantime, we also have to approve, the member states have to ratify the new own resources decision. So these are two key elements. After that, what will happen in concrete terms is that these plans being approved, they will be entitled to a pre-financing of 13%. And I think this could be done late spring, early summer. This is where I see the first money coming to the member states. And I would like to add that this is a long-term project, so the commitments will be until 2023. So this is not just for this year, this is for 3 years. So it will be a long-term project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. At this stage, I would like to launch a quick poll with our audience to involve you in the event. And the question is very simple. It's going to appear on your screen and ask you to make a selection. Having listened to all the presentations, which issue do you now consider to be the most important? In other words, maybe you might have, when you read the list before the event, prejudice, and you have now heard our colleagues, and you might have changed your mind. So what do you think now after the presentation? So make your choice. You have, I think, 5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, to make your choice, and at the end, we will give you the result. This brings me to a remark that has been done by somebody in the audience. Leonard Mitzi was wondering why China is not included, and if we could have included also other topics such as multilateralism, Green Deal, and so on. Just to say a few words about the process. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is not everything about the EPRS. This is not at all about agenda setting. It's a result of a collective reflection where we mix old and new, where we mix larger issues or wide-ranging issues with more specific issues, and we assume that the choice is subjective. But we consider it's interesting also to look at issues that are less prominent in the public debate, but we consider that they are coming up. So in no way the issues that are not treated there are not important for us. And I'd like to refer also that overall, the EPRS publishes more than 1,000 publications a year, and that every issues that are mentioned there are really largely covered. So this is just these 10 issues, a snapshot of different issues that we have discussed. I continue while people are voting. I continue with questions. And I just need to read what I have received here. Yes, I think this question is probably for Anna CAPRILE. Which lessons can we learn from the pandemic in terms of food security, both in the EU and at the global level? Which measures worked well? What is the EU doing to ensure that we are ready for another crisis? That's one question. I have another one, which is probably for Rose, which is about inequality. Besides legislation, what are the other concrete tools that the EU can use to advance on equality? So think about these questions. And I have a question also, I think it's for both Marcin and Gregor. Gregor, the digital economy, what about greenhouse gases? And Marcin on raw materials, how to avoid a conflict with China. Think of the Belt and Road Initiative. Anna, Rose, and then Marcin and Gregor for your comments. First, Anna.
I think my voice is not. Okay. So first of all, let's hope that we don't have a new crisis soon. That's the first part of my answer. What did we learn? So we learned that we have to be better prepared. That's why one of the first things that the EU has put in the food for in the farm to fork strategy is the preparation of a contingency plan for in the eventuality of a new crisis. What did it work well? Well, what worked well were that some measures were taken quite rapidly, and these measures were addressed to flexibilize the system. Green lines for workers, for fresh food, and for goods that could not wait in the borders. Flexibilization of state aid for farmers in need. So a whole set
I think that Anna has an issue of connection. This is happening when you do a live event with more than 10 presenters. Maybe we come back to Anna later. In the meanwhile, I wonder if Rose, you had time to think about the question on solidarity, discrimination. Rose, please.
Yeah, so tools apart from legislation. Well, clearly, first of all, the legislation is really important because we need comparable minimum standards, at least of protection against discrimination across the EU, and there are areas where that is missing, for example, violence against women. On the other hand, legislation is not everything. Another really key area for the EU is funding. So we've heard a bit about the recovery package and also the budget, the MFF, the multi-annual financial framework. There will be a considerable amount of money set aside in that for example, funding for civil society organisations that are really working on the front line, supporting victims of discrimination, also training for people that are involved, law enforcement, people working in the health sector and so on. So those are all really concrete areas where EU funding can help. And I think really the nitty-gritty as well, that the EU can do more and also the member states can do more, is just collecting the kind of disaggregated data that we need to monitor equality. And there are a lot of gaps in a lot of different areas at the moment. I think that also shows kind of a lot of the levers are actually in the hands of the member states rather than the EU. So it's a very complicated field, and also, I suppose the question of what do you do to actually help to change the kind of really deep-rooted attitudes that are perpetuating discrimination at the base, and that's really a very complicated issue.
Thank you, Rose. I'd like to move to Gregor and Marcin if they have comments on the question that was addressed to them about the greenhouse gases. For Gregor, the question is not so specific, but are there any link between the digital economy on the one hand and reduction of CO2 emissions? That's how I understand the question. And for Marcin, on the question of raw materials and the difficult relation with China. And there is a mention here by the person putting the question to think about the Belt and Road Initiative. So maybe first Gregor for some comments and then Marcin.
Yes, on digital technologies and greenhouse gas emissions, we see conflicting tendencies. On the one hand, digital technologies become ever more energy efficient, so that reduces energy use and reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And digital technologies can also help, for example, increase the share of renewable energies in the system. Think, for example, of smart charging and vehicle-to-grid technology, so the batteries of the electric vehicles can take electricity, renewable electricity from the grid when it is cheaper in month, when the sun is shining, wind is blowing, and then feed it back to the grid when the energy is needed. But on the other hand, digital technologies and services are growing so fast exponentially that more than outpaces all energy efficiency improvements. One particular example is Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin is a digital currency based on blockchain, which has a massive energy use comparable to a medium-sized country like Switzerland. And this is often not renewable energy, but the energy that is the cheapest. So that's often based on coal. Video streaming is another aspect, although it's hard here to find really reliable data. And for the production of digital technologies, of course, you would need to do complex life cycle analysis. But there are initiatives at European level. One is eco-design to reduce the energy use of servers. There's a European Code of Conduct for data centers to reduce their energy use. And finally, the carbon border adjustment can help put a price on the greenhouse gas emissions of digital products that are imported into the EU.
Thank you, Gregor. And then I move to Marcin. If you have any comments, and Marcin, in the meanwhile, there is another question that is, you mentioned several actions to cover our needs in critical raw materials. If you can give one example, and the question I mentioned before about China, and if you could comment on these two questions, please. Thank you.
Could you please repeat the first question?
So
the example of actions.
yeah, if there are some, you mentioned several external actions to cover our needs in critical raw materials. Can you give one example? And the other question was about raw materials, also how to avoid conflict with China and think about the Belt and Road Initiative. Do you wish to comment on this?
So if EU is on the external front, they're going to launch a new political partnership considering critical raw materials. And this year in 2021, they are considering countries like Canada, Australia, which are very rich in critical raw materials, and that will be like a pilot, and more countries are to follow. So this is one thing. About the conflict with China, I think it works both ways, because it's true that China has control of many supply chains of critical raw materials, but on the other hand, EU is China's largest trading partner, and China is EU's second trading partner. So it's a very deep relationship, very significant relationship. Not where you could clearly say that one is stronger than the other. You can see that, for example, that just last autumn, China has signaled ambition to become carbon neutral country by 2060. So I would say here we offer access to the market, and I think with this and seek also elsewhere critical raw materials. So I would say that there is a more interest in cooperation than in conflict here between the two.
Thank you very much, Martin. In the meanwhile, did Anna manage to yeah, you're back with us, Anna. You were explaining your point on food, and you were interrupted by technology. So here we are.
Yes, the question was, what have we learned, what worked, and what can be done to be prepared for the next crisis, if I remember correctly the question. And well, first of all, let's hope that we don't have a crisis anytime soon. But yes, the better the better is to be prepared for it. So on the whole, as I said, the EU system proved resilient, and this is also because a set of very swift measures were taken by the EU. And the European Parliament played a role in that by adopting specific regulations and by prompting the Commission to adopt measures. The measures were basically to flexibilize the system in terms of circulation of goods and critical workers, flexibilization of state aid to help farmers make face of very specific situations. For them, the closure of restaurants and all the hotels, etc., was very critical. There were also some measures to derogate competition rules for specific sectors like milk, etc., etc. So all that has been taken by the Commission to publish specific guidelines to the next crisis, and this is part also of the plan of the Commission. But the best we can do is to prepare for the transition into this sustainable agri-food business, and that's what the Commission is doing through the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy. So the best thing we can do is that to make that the food is part of the solution and not part of the problem as it is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think I have a couple of questions on migration and Europe's borders. Question: Is the border procedure really new, and what is exactly the added value of this new proposal? And there have been persistent disagreement on key aspects of the pact. How likely is to reach an agreement on this proposal? You mentioned potential negative effects on asylum. What are the main risks in this area? And then I would ask also Brand to get ready for the next question. On Turkey, I just read, due to the different member states' interests, we have seen diverging positions among the EU member states, for example, regarding sanctions and arms purchased to Turkey. You think member states will find a common line in this year? This is a question from Andreas, who signed this question. And another question on Turkey. Could we expect a more assertive Turkish role in the East Med? And if yes, what are the options for reactions on the youth table? So maybe we take first Kostika on the migration issues, and then we would move to the question on Turkey. And I just see that I have another question on migration. That is that I'm not sure I understand in detail, but it's about, yeah, I just need to find it again. It's about paying for migrants. I don't really understand. Yeah, if all states choose to pay rather than receive asylum seekers, what do we do with the migrants? So I don't think it's completely clear, but it maybe refers to some agreement that were done in Turkey in the last year. So maybe first Kostika on migration and borders, and then Bran, get ready for saying a few words on Turkey and the role of Turkey. Please, Kostika.
Thank you, Etienne, and thank you for the questions. Well, I'll try to be brief because we may talk a couple of days about these questions. First of all, what is new? There's some criticism that the proposal does not bring something new, something that is not in the border Schengen code, for example, or in other instruments. There is some fairness maybe with this criticism, but I can point to two elements, which is the preliminary health assessment, which is pretty new and it's very timely, also in line of the what happened with the health crisis. And also there is this interesting idea of bringing in a monitoring mechanism for fundamental rights, which is also very much needed, especially if you look and hear all kind of news about deficiencies on fundamental rights aspects at the borders. Now, how will we reach? Is it possible to reach an agreement now, half a decade after maybe when the first proposal to reform the asylum system have been launched? Nobody knows. We hope. We must consider also that the Commission tried their best maybe to come up with a couple of proposals that in a way will be a draft starting point for the discussion. So this is what we are seeing actually now also in the Council and soon in the Parliament. There will be a lot of discussion about the nitty-gritty of how we go forward with this. So maybe one point to mention is that we see if there is any type of broad agreement between member states is that we need to fix the borders, we need to strengthen the borders, we need to make sure that the return, for example, procedure works. And this is where I see this key proposal coming in to smoothen this process and to make sure that there is a clear transition between border and then asylum and return. So that's something positive. But of course, as the third question was about impact on asylum, inevitably there are a lot of questions there about how would this what seems an administrative procedure will actually affect the status, the fundamental rights of the asylum seekers, and also how would actually affect and solve some of the systemic issues. I mean, just making the deadlines shorter and making sure that people do not leave a certain space across the border or something. That's in a way, it's a positive, but it is very, there are very many concerns about the realistic. Is that realistic, given also our experience in the hotspots, for example? So it's just the beginning. That's why I said there'll be a lot of discussion and a lot of negotiations ahead. It's just a draft. So let's hope it's gonna come something interesting out of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Lustica. Branislav, on Turkey.
So I will start with the second question, whether we will see escalation or maybe some more peaceful steps in the Eastern Mediterranean. So I think that there are maybe three aspects. One is internal Turkish politics. And here it is clear that Erdogan is losing a lot against opposition. Also on economic field, the Turkish lira last year was at the lowest level against US dollar and euro, and a very high level of inflation, over 12%. So economic situation in Turkey is very bad. Then social situation is also very bad because we have seen rising poverty, also raising unhappiness with the presence of migrants, especially from Syria. So there are a lot of tensions internally in Turkey, and Erdogan policy seeks to turn this attention of Turkish public to external policies, especially in Syria, Libya, Nagorno-Karabakh, and now these disputes with EU member states, especially with Greece and Cyprus. But I think that he himself understood that he's going too far, and at the end it is hurting Turkish interest. So what we have seen this weekend, Erdogan, he had a talk with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. They discuss accession negotiations. They discuss also customs union, trade issue. They discuss also migration issues. And the result is that we see the escalation of the Eastern Mediterranean. And this Monday, Ankara and Athens, they agreed together that they will again start to talk to, and they will resume talks on the 25th of January, and probably find a way how to explore together these gas resources in the Mediterranean. The question on member states and different position of member states, it's clear that this year, despite the request of the heads of EU that was formulated last December at the Council meeting, European Commission will prepare a new strategy. This strategy of EU-Turkey relations should be published in March. However, as we know, the internal situation in some member states, like in Germany, there will be election in September, 26th of September. There is quite a substantial minority, Turkish minority. So I don't expect, and there are not many analysts that would expect the big changes in the situation, at least until situation in Germany is clear and until the election in September.
Thank you very much, Bran. And time is flying. I still have a question on culture, which I think is for Denise. It's a question that you raised. You mentioned the role of the institutions, but also the role of the general public in supporting the cultural sector. And somebody's asking what concretely citizens can do to help this cultural sector. So you can share your thoughts on this.
Well, I think there's a number of things that we can do. For one thing, we can inform ourselves, because understanding the issues means that we give support to policies that are really useful and really help the sector. The political sphere is very sensitive to public opinion. So if public opinion is informed, then the political sphere also will in some ways reflect that. Then I've also mentioned concrete things, small things that we can do. There are many initiatives, even from the sector itself, which is seeking financial support, basically. It's seeking a lifeline, by following events, which we pay for, or joining crowdfunding initiatives. All these can help. And then as citizens, we can also be part of civil society. And then, there it's a bit more structured. So again, civil society has a voice. and that can be used to carry a message. So I think it's on various levels that citizens can act. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. And then I have, just for you to know, we were at the max, it's a bit less now, but 240, which is quite a success for such an event. I think we have also in the meanwhile the results of the poll, which is quite surprising, and I can ask Anne-Cécile to show it. So here we are. So we see that the two issues that we included in our publications, vaccines and recovery, are really dominating this year's debates and are also constantly in our minds. But the third topic voted for, namely food, seems to be more important than we would have thought before. So thanks for participating, and I think that about 2/3 of the attendees participated to that poll. Thanks a lot to you. Now I move to a last set of questions that are all for Eleni, and that are about transatlantic relations. Just bring them to you without any particular order. The first question is, well, it's a very practical one. When do you think the US will open its borders for EU tourists, somebody interested to go to the US? Another quite concrete, when do we expect President Biden to address the European Parliament? And another one, question on transatlantic relation, what issues in the transatlantic relation are expected to improve with the new administration, and what other challenges are likely to remain? That's a larger one and maybe a more difficult one, but it gives you the opportunity to wrap up on the transatlantic relation. Elena, please.
Thank you very much, Etienne, and thank you for the questions, two of which I think would require a crystal ball, but I will attempt. With regard to opening of the borders, obviously I don't have an answer, but what I would say is that based on what most analyses are saying and based on what we are observing, I would imagine that the EU and the US would continue and perhaps even reinforce some bilateral dialogue about this and how it can happen in a coordinated manner, the opening of borders. And of course, it could be said that something like that might be discussed also on the multilateral level, but I would hesitate to make any predictions given that epidemiological factors will clearly be in the lead in the decision to restart global tourism. But I would say that as a principle, I think dialogue and trying to have multilateral rules-based solutions to these issues and definitely to not halt global movement would be on the agenda of both the Biden administration, but I would also say the EU Commission and the leaders of the EU member states. Now on the future president visiting the European Parliament, again, I don't have any specific and confidential information, but it would appear that the president-elect will be coming to Europe for the NATO summit sometime in early 2021. He has been invited by Jens Stoltenberg, and it would seem that he would likely address the European Parliament on that occasion if he does accept an invitation by the president, and a number of members of parliament have requested that from the president. So assuming all this happens, I think it might not take too long for that to happen. Now on the issues, obviously there is not that much time to cover everything, and I would encourage the person who asked to read our publication on the foreign policy of the Biden administration. But I would say that looking at the Biden agenda, but also on the new EU-US transatlantic agenda that I mentioned, we can expect that at least on 3 areas we will see some progress in EU-US relations, and one will be climate governance, climate issues globally, with the US having pledged to re-enter the Paris Agreement, and obviously the Green Deal being on top of the EU agenda. So climate, I would say, is definitely an area where we'll see more cooperation. I think democracy, with all its aspects, ranging from promoting democracy globally to ensuring and defending democracy domestically, including the fight against disinformation and the way that digital platforms operate, is another issue where we'll see a lot of progress. And it's been a big issue also on the transatlantic parliamentary agenda, which I think we will be continuing to see that be at the center stage of. So democracy, climate, And then a third, democracy, climate, and then, of course, global security, with the new security and defense dialogue set to be established, but also, of course, with the US potentially changing its approach towards Iran, potentially re-entering the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear agreement, and other such issues. Now, on the issues where we might see a bit more hesitation in doing everything together, and we mentioned that in our publication, which is co-authored with Jana Titievskaya, I would just mention the WTO reform and China. I will not go into detail because I see time is finishing, but I think these two issues will be issues on which the bilateral dialogue will attempt and intend to find positions that work, collaborative positions, but they will also depend on the domestic economic situation of both the EU and the US, and also the multilateral agenda, as well as relations with China on both sides. So I'll stop here just as a teaser for many things to come ahead, and thank you very much for the questions.
So many thanks, Elena. And with your contribution, we come to the end of this policy roundtable. Our open discussion today did not cover all aspects of the written research. It was rather to raise your appetite to read it. We hope we succeeded. Each issue is covered by 2 pages with references. It's easy to read, even on a mobile device. Take the time to read it. But one thing is clear, I think, after the discussion, I think that Vice President Karas was right in quoting the poet Elder Lin. I think the year 2021 is a year of opportunities for the European Union to grow if the will is there to move forward. The 10 issues are already strongly present in the public debate. We will, in the EPRS, keep watching the issues in our research all along the year. And as our Director General Anthony Teasdale said at the beginning of the event, we hope that the publication will be help for members for their daily work in the institution, but also in their contacts with the citizens and the general public. The best thing that can happen to us is that this work is used widely. I would like to thank Isabel Godel and Madalena Zappala, whose help was crucial in the successful preparation of the event. They are behind these 10 issues to watch 1 and 2, and I asked them to unmute their camera. I would like also to thank Anne-Cécile, Vinay and Cynthia for the technical support and the promotion, and of course many thanks to the speakers and the audience for the lively discussions. The recording of this event will be soon available on the EPRS website and on YouTube. And finally, I'd like to announce that the next policy roundtable will be on Wednesday, the 20th of January, with Carmen Reinhardt, the chief economist of the World Bank, and we invite you already to register for that event. Thank you very much to all of you. Have a nice day and see you soon. Bye-bye.